The video showed me in a hospital bed, but I was at my kitchen table. My son's voice cracked as he described my rapid decline, and the donations climbed past $40,000. I wasn't sick. He'd faked the whole thing to file for emergency guardianship, freeze my accounts, and put my house on the market. Then, a geriatric psychiatrist from another state called. He'd never met me, but he knew my son had stolen his identity too, and he was about to help me tear down every lie. My name is Margaret. I'm a 67-year-old retired teacher, and until a few weeks ago, I thought my son loved me. Then I saw the video he posted. He was crying beside a hospital bed, telling the internet that I had dementia and needed a care facility. I was sitting in my kitchen, perfectly healthy, while donations poured in, $40,000. That video was the first step in a scheme to have me declared incompetent, freeze my assets, and seize my home. And it would have succeeded, except for one thing. The geriatric psychiatrist whose name he forged had never met me, but he was about to become my greatest ally. It started on a Tuesday. I was at my kitchen table, sorting through old lesson plans, something to keep my hands busy since retirement. The house was quiet except for the birds outside. Then my phone buzzed. My neighbor Ruth sent a text with a link. "Is this you, Margaret?" I opened it, and my whole world tilted. There was my son, Kevin, on a video. He was standing beside a hospital bed, his face wet with tears, saying my name over and over. Only I wasn't in that bed. The woman in the video was an actress or a stranger, I still don't know. But Kevin was describing my rapid cognitive decline, how the doctors said I needed a specialized memory care unit, how he couldn't afford it alone. He'd set up a fundraising page. I scrolled. Donations were live, ticking upward. In the time it took me to understand what I was seeing, the number passed $42,000. I sat there, coffee cold, my heart pounding, and realized my son had just told the world I was losing my mind, while I was perfectly fine, 30 miles away in my own kitchen. I tried calling Kevin, straight to voicemail. I texted, "What is this video? Call me now." No reply. I watched the video again, paying attention this time. He wore a rumpled sweater I'd given him last Christmas. He used details only an insider would know: my real medication list, my actual doctor's name, the side effects I'd mentioned once when my blood pressure spiked. That's what made it believable. The betrayal didn't come from a stranger. It came from someone who knew me intimately. He'd weaponized every mundane fact, every family dinner conversation, and twisted them into a performance of grief. The comments below the video were full of heart emojis and prayers. Strangers called him a devoted son. One woman wrote, "My father had dementia. I know how hard this is. God bless you." I felt sick. My own child had turned my life into a crowd-funded lie, and the internet was applauding. I needed to understand why. Kevin and I had never been close, not since his father died. But he'd always been polite, distant, never cruel. The previous year, he'd started a new business, some online venture that never quite took off. He'd asked me for loans, which I gave, $20,000 total. He stopped asking after I said I couldn't help anymore. We still had Sunday calls, short and surface level. I thought he was just busy. Now I saw everything differently. Those calls, the questions about my memory, the way he'd ask if I'd forgotten to pay a bill or if I'd gotten lost driving, I'd brush them off as concern. Looking back, he was building a file. Every small hesitation, every misplaced key, he was documenting it, rehearsing the story he'd later sell online. 2 days after the video went up, the real attack began. A process server knocked on my door at 7 in the morning. He handed me a thick envelope. Inside was an emergency petition for guardianship. Kevin was asking a judge to declare me legally incompetent immediately, without a full hearing. He claimed I was a danger to myself, that I'd left the stove on twice, that I was forgetting to eat. He attached a medical report from a geriatric psychiatrist, a Dr. Alan Heller, detailing a diagnosis that didn't exist. The report said I had advanced Alzheimer's. I'd never met a Dr. Heller. His signature was on forms that described my supposed symptoms in clinical detail. Forged, every word. but the court didn't know that yet. The petition also asked to freeze my assets to prevent exploitation. That meant my bank accounts, my pension, my house, everything I'd built over 40 years of teaching was about to be taken out of my hands. I called my bank. They confirmed 2 accounts were already restricted due to a pending legal action. I sat on the floor of my living room, the petition spread around me, and tried to breathe. The phone rang. A real estate agent said a moving van was scheduled to arrive the next morning to take me to an assisted living facility. I hadn't packed a thing. I told her there was a mistake, but she insisted all the arrangements were made by my son and the court. I hung up and looked out the window, half expecting to see a van idling at the curb. My house, the house where I'd raised Kevin, the one my husband and I saved for years to buy, was being stolen from me with paperwork and a sad story on the internet. I found a lawyer, an elder law specialist, but she warned me how slow the system could be. Emergency orders move fast, and overturning them is an uphill climb. The guardianship hearing was in 5 days. I had no proof that I was competent except my own word against a fabricated medical file and a viral video with $60,000 in donations. Kevin's narrative was already public. The world believed I was a confused old woman who needed saving from herself. I was being erased in real time, and the worst part was that the person doing it was my only child. The night before the hearing, I sat in the dark of my kitchen, trying to figure out how to fight. I didn't own a computer, didn't know how to reach the platform that hosted the video, and my lawyer said we'd need our own expert witness to counter the psychiatrist's report. But who would believe a retired English teacher over a doctor's diagnosis? Kevin had built a flawless trap. Then, at 11 o'clock, the phone rang. I almost didn't answer. But something made me pick up. The voice on the other end was steady, professional, and angry. Mrs. Dunn, my name is Dr. Alan Heller. I am a geriatric psychiatrist in Maryland. I have never met you, never examined you, and never wrote any report about your mental state. I just saw the video your son posted, and I am calling to tell you that he stole my identity. Everything is forged, and I'm going to help you make this right. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles ached. For the first time in a week, I felt like I could breathe. He wasn't just offering sympathy. He'd already called the FBI. He had the original image that Kevin had doctored, a photo from a medical conference years ago. He was ready to testify. The man whose name was used to destroy me was now the cornerstone of my defense, and he was furious enough to fly across the country to do it. Dr. Heller arrived 2 days later. He wasn't what I expected. Tall, silver hair, a quiet intensity behind his glasses. He walked into my living room carrying a leather briefcase and the anger of a man whose life's work had been used to destroy an innocent person. He spread documents across my coffee table, the original conference photo, the one Kevin had cropped and altered to place me in a hospital bed he'd never visited. He showed me the real medical credentials, the published research, the years of honest practice. Your son didn't just lie about you, he said. He lied about me. He photoshopped my face onto a fake report. He forged my signature on a diagnosis that doesn't exist. If that report stood, it would end my career. So I'm not here just for you, Margaret. I'm here for both of us. We worked through the night. My lawyer, a woman named Diane, who had grown increasingly furious as she pieced together Kevin's scheme, joined us. We built a counter-narrative, a timeline of Kevin's financial desperation, the $20,000 I'd already given him, the business that had failed spectacularly. Dr. Heller brought in a forensic document examiner who had already verified that the medical report was printed on a generic template, not medical letterhead, and that the signature was a traceable copy from a scanned prescription. The depth of the forgery was stunning, but the audacity was what shook me. Kevin had Googled a respected geriatric psychiatrist, stolen a photo from a conference website, and crafted a medical opinion in minutes. He'd counted on the court not digging too deep. The morning of the hearing, I dressed in the same blue cardigan I'd worn to every parent-teacher conference for 20 years. It felt like armor. The courtroom was small, sterile, with fluorescent lights that hummed. Kevin sat at the petitioner's table in a cheap suit, his face a mask of practiced concern. He wouldn't look at me. Beside him was a lawyer I'd never seen, a young man with a briefcase that looked brand new. The judge, a woman named Judge Patterson, was known for no-nonsense guardianship cases. I sat with Diane, my heart thudding. Kevin's lawyer went first. He played the video. Right there in court, on a large screen, Kevin's tear-streaked face filled the room, talking about my rapid decline and the specialized care I supposedly needed. I saw the judge's expression soften, ever so slightly. Then he called Kevin to testify. My son walked to the stand, swore to tell the truth, and proceeded to lie with an ease that made my stomach drop. He described me forgetting his name, wandering the neighborhood at night, leaving the stove on until the kitchen filled with smoke. Each detail was a fabrication so precise it had to have been rehearsed. He even pointed at me and said, "She doesn't even know where she is right now. Look at her." I gripped the edge of the table. Diane squeezed my hand. "Wait," she whispered. When it was our turn, Diane stood and said, "The respondent calls Dr. Alan Heller." Kevin's lawyer objected, but Judge Patterson overruled him. Dr. Heller walked to the stand, took the oath, and Diane held up the forged medical report. "Doctor, have you ever treated Mrs. Dunn?" He looked Kevin right in the eyes. "I have never met this woman. I have never examined her. I have never written a report diagnosing her with Alzheimer's or any other condition. That document is a complete fabrication. Someone stole my identity, and I have the original photograph to prove it." He produced the conference photo, the date stamp, the metadata that showed it was taken 3 years before I was supposedly in that hospital bed. The courtroom went silent. Kevin's face lost all color. His lawyer fumbled for questions but found none. Dr. Heller then delivered the killing blow. "I contacted the fundraising platform this morning. I have proof that the campaign was linked to Kevin's personal bank account, not any medical facility. I've also spoken to the administrator of the hospital pictured in his video. They confirmed no one matching my description was ever admitted there. The entire video was staged." The judge ordered a recess. When she returned, she had a grim expression. "I'm vacating the emergency guardianship order immediately. The financial freeze is lifted. Mrs. Dunn, I'm sorry you had to endure this. Mr. Dunn, you are hereby ordered to surrender all funds raised and submit to a full financial audit. I'm also referring this matter to the district attorney's office for criminal investigation." Kevin stood, his mask finally cracking. He pointed at me, his voice rising. "You don't understand. I needed that money. You were always so selfish. I would have let you live in the facility. It was better than you rotting alone in that house." The bailiff moved toward him. Kevin stormed out before they could restrain him, but not before I saw the raw fury in his eyes. I'd spent a week terrified of my own son, but in that moment I realized he was terrified too, of being caught. The next day, the donations were frozen. The video came down. News of the hearing spread, and the public narrative flipped overnight. Headlines called it, "Son accused of faking mother's dementia for cash." I received messages from strangers who'd seen the viral clip and now felt betrayed. But Kevin wasn't done. He gave an interview to a local news station from an undisclosed location, claiming Dr. Heller and I had conspired against him, that I really was declining and the doctor was covering it up. The station aired it, and suddenly the story had two sides again. I watched it in my living room, my hands trembling as my son spun a new web, and that's when I got the second call that changed everything. It was a woman's voice, soft and hesitant. "Mrs. Dunn, my name is Carla. I saw your son's video months ago, but I didn't think anyone would believe me. He tried to do the same thing to my mother." She paused, breathing hard. "He didn't succeed, but he came close. I have emails, recordings, everything. I think we need to talk." I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles white. Carla's voice was small, the kind of quiet that comes from carrying fear for too long. She told me she and her mother lived 2 states away, in a small town in Ohio. 2 years ago, a man calling himself Mark started volunteering at the senior center where her mother played bridge. He was kind, attentive, said he'd lost his own mother and missed her terribly. He brought flowers, fixed a leaky faucet, even helped with grocery shopping. Within a few months, he'd convinced her mother to give him power of attorney over her medical decisions. He said it was just a precaution in case something happened. Carla had been suspicious from the beginning, but her mother was lonely, and Mark seemed so sincere. Then the same nightmare began. A video appeared on a small fundraising site. Mark, weeping, claiming her mother had dementia and needed care. He'd staged a visit to a clinic, faked a doctor's note. But Carla's mother's actual physician saw the video and called the police immediately. The scheme unraveled before any money could be taken. Mark vanished overnight. He'd used a burner phone, a fake address. The police couldn't find him, and Carla's mother was too ashamed to push the case. She just wanted to forget it ever happened. But Carla had kept everything. Screenshots of the fundraising page, emails from Mark with his love-bombing language, photos she'd taken of him at the senior center, even a recording of a conversation where he pressured her mother to sign documents. She'd been waiting, hoping one day someone would come looking for him. I sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd first seen Kevin's video, and opened my laptop. Carla sent the files through a secure link. I stared at the photo of Mark. It was Kevin. Same hair, same weak chin, same smile that never reached his eyes. But he'd grown a beard and worn glasses. His voice on the recording was higher, a nervous twang I'd never heard him use with me. But it was him. There was no doubt. My son had tried to do this to another family before he came for me. The business failure I'd loaned him money for was likely a cover for his real occupation, professional con artist. I called Diane, my lawyer, and forwarded everything. She was silent for a long moment, then said, "Margaret, this changes everything. If we can show a pattern of predatory behavior across state lines, the FBI will have to get involved. This isn't just fraud. This is organized elder exploitation." She explained that Kevin's use of a fake identity and interstate fundraising could trigger federal charges with much steeper penalties. But we needed more. A confession, a witness, something ironclad. The district attorney had already been hesitant to pursue a case based solely on the forged report and the video, especially after Kevin's counter-interview painted me as a vindictive mother. Now, with Carla's evidence, we had a much stronger case, but we still needed to connect Kevin directly to the Mark persona. Dr. Heller joined us on a conference call that evening. He had been doing his own digging. He'd contacted colleagues across the country, asking if anyone else had been impersonated in a similar elder fraud scheme. Within a day, he got a hit. A psychiatrist in Florida reported that 2 years ago, someone had used his name to authorize a guardianship petition in a case that sounded hauntingly familiar. The target was an elderly man named Harold. The petition had been dropped when Harold's daughter intervened, but the false report remained on file. Dr. Heller believed it was the same person. We now had 3 known attempts, 2 of them linked to Kevin. The net was tightening, but Kevin was not sitting idle. 3 days after the court hearing, a new video appeared on a different platform. This time, Kevin was sitting in a tidy living room looking directly into the camera. He wasn't crying now. He was calm, controlled, and angry. He claimed I had manipulated Dr. Heller, that my dementia was real but intermittent, and that I'd turned the court against him because I resented his happiness. He held up a stack of papers he said were medical records from a new doctor, though the doctor's name was conveniently blurred. He asked his followers to donate to his legal defense fund. The video went viral within hours. The comments were split. Some people still believed him, calling me a monster. Others were skeptical, asking why he'd been ordered to return the money if he was innocent. The damage was done. I was being dragged through the mud again, and my son was painting himself as the victim. The next morning, the moving van returned. Not to take me away this time, but a crew of men began unloading boxes from a truck parked across the street. I watched from my window as they carried furniture into a house 2 doors down. My neighbor, Ruth, called to tell me she'd seen Kevin that morning, directing the delivery. He'd rented a house on my street. He was moving in just yards from my front door. I felt my blood run cold. He wasn't running. He was settling in as if to say that I couldn't escape him, that he would watch me, wait for me to make a mistake, and then pounce again. The psychological warfare was as calculated as the financial fraud. Diane filed an emergency restraining order, but the judge said it required a hearing, which would take a week. In the meantime, Kevin was free to live wherever he wanted. Carla, hearing about this, decided to fly in to support me. She arrived with a thick binder of evidence and a quiet determination that steadied my nerves. We sat in my living room, going over every detail of her mother's case, cross-referencing Kevin's known movements. That's when we found the smoking gun. Kevin had used a specific phrase in his fundraising video for Carla's mother. "I just want her last years to be peaceful." He'd used the exact same phrase in my video, word for word. A script? A con artist's script. A forensic linguist Diane retained confirmed it. The probability of two separate people using that exact phrasing, combined with the staging similarities, was close to zero. We now had a direct link between the two frauds. Carla also remembered something else. She had seen a woman with Kevin, Mark, she'd called him then a few times. A thin, red-haired woman who seemed to be coaching him. She'd assumed it was a girlfriend. I knew immediately who she meant. Kevin had a friend named Stacy, a woman he'd introduced to me once as a business partner. I hadn't thought much of it at the time, but now the pieces clicked. Kevin wasn't alone. He had an accomplice, someone who might still be helping him. If we could find Stacy and get her to turn, she could provide the testimony that would put Kevin away for good. Diane started the legal process of subpoenaing phone records, but time was against us. Kevin's new fundraising campaign was gathering steam. He'd already collected nearly $10,000 from a new set of sympathetic strangers. And every day, he sat on the porch of his rented house drinking coffee, watching my home. He waved at me once, a slow, deliberate wave that made my skin crawl. I knew then that waiting for the system to work wasn't enough. We had to take the fight to him. That evening, Carla, Dr. Heller, Diane, and I formed a plan. We would give Kevin exactly what he wanted, a meeting. I would call him tearfully and say that the stress was too much. I'd offer to sign over power of attorney voluntarily if he'd just stop the public smear campaign and let me live in peace. I'd ask him to come to the house to discuss it. We would have recording devices ready, and the police would be listening in from a van parked a block away. We'd get him on tape admitting that the dementia was a lie, that he'd forged the documents, that the whole thing was a scheme to steal my assets. It was terrifying, but it was the only way to get a confession that would hold up in court. I called Kevin the next morning. My voice trembled, but not from acting. He answered on the second ring, his tone wary. I laid out the offer, letting the tears I'd been holding back seep through. I told him I was tired, that I didn't want to fight anymore, that he could have control of the house and my savings if he'd just leave me alone. There was a long pause. Then he said, "I'll be there tonight, 7 o'clock. Don't try anything stupid, Mom." The word Mom sounded like a weapon. I hung up and looked at Carla. She nodded. The trap was set. That afternoon, a police technician came to install recording equipment. He hid microphones in the living room, tested them twice, and gave me a panic button disguised as a brooch. Detective Alvarez from the fraud division briefed me on what to say, how to guide Kevin into incriminating himself. She told me to stay calm, to let him talk, to ask open-ended questions. I practiced in the mirror, my reflection looking older and more fragile than I felt. At 6:30, I sat in my armchair, the same chair I'd read bedtime stories to Kevin in when he was a child, and I waited. Outside, the street grew dark. At exactly 7 o'clock, headlights swept across my window. A car pulled into the driveway. I heard footsteps on the porch, then the doorbell. My son had come home, and for the first time in my life, I was about to outmaneuver him completely. I took a breath, walked to the door, and opened it to look into the face of a stranger I used to love. Kevin stood on my porch, the same porch where he'd learned to ride a bike, where I'd hung Halloween decorations every October. He looked thinner than I remembered, his eyes hollow. He wasn't wearing the sad, rumpled sweater from the video, just a dark jacket and a tight, forced smile. "Mom," he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. I led him to the living room, the same room where the microphones were hidden, where Detective Alvarez and her team were listening from a van 3 blocks away. My heart hammered, but I kept my voice steady, like I'd practiced. Thank you for coming. I know things have been hard between us. He sat on the couch, not the chair I'd offered. He leaned back, crossing his legs, the posture of a man who thought he'd already won. I poured him coffee, his favorite, hazelnut, the way he used to drink it as a teenager. He didn't touch it. You said you wanted to talk about signing over the house, he said, getting straight to business. His voice had none of the tearful warmth from the video. This was Kevin stripped of the performance, direct, cold, and almost bored. I nodded, letting my hands tremble a little more than they needed to. I can't take the fighting anymore. I'm old, Kevin. If you want the house, the savings, you can have them. I just want to live quietly somewhere, without all this attention. He studied me, looking for a trap. I met his eyes, letting the exhaustion show. It wasn't hard. I was exhausted. You're finally being reasonable, he said. I always told you that you'd be happier somewhere safe. This place is too much for you. I let him talk. I asked him to explain the guardianship again, how it would work, what the doctors said. He relaxed, the way a predator relaxes when prey stops running. He started describing my supposed symptoms in detail, the same lies from the forged report. I asked if Dr. Heller would still be involved. Kevin laughed, a short, ugly sound. Heller? That old fraud? He's nobody. I found his photo online, slapped his name on a PDF. It was easy. He said it with pride, as if he were describing a clever business deal. I felt a surge of anger, but kept my voice calm. You photoshopped the whole thing? He shrugged. It doesn't matter now. The court already saw through him. But with you cooperating, I can get a new doctor. Someone who'll write a real report. He paused, then added, I'm not stupid. I've done this before. I know how to make it stick. That was it. The admission we needed. I asked carefully, You've helped other families like ours? He leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. You remember that business I started? The one that failed? It wasn't a business, it was a test run. An old woman in Ohio, just like you, lonely, stubborn, sitting on a house worth more than her life. I rented a house next to her, same as I did here. Got her to trust me. Raised 20 grand before her nosy daughter got in the way. He talked about Carla's mother like she was a transaction, not a person. He told me he'd used a fake name, fake beard, fake everything. He said, people want to believe in a devoted son. It's the easiest story to sell. I could hear faintly the sound of my own pulse in my ears, but I kept asking questions. How did he find the doctor's identity? How did he set up the fundraiser? He answered each one, his voice growing more animated, more proud. Eventually, I said the words Detective Alvarez had told me to use. So you never really thought I had dementia. You just needed money. Kevin looked at me, and for a moment something flickered behind his eyes. Maybe shame, maybe just calculation. You were going to leave everything to charity anyway. I heard you talking about it to Ruth. A scholarship fund for poor kids. I couldn't let that happen. All those years you gave me nothing. No support for my real dreams. Just lectures and disappointment. I'd known he resented me, but hearing it laid out like that, as justification for destroying my life, was still a shock. He stood up, pacing now, his voice rising. So yes, I made up the dementia. I forged the reports. I staged the video. And it would have worked if that stupid doctor hadn't called you. But now you're going to fix it. You're going to sign the papers tonight, and I'll even let you stay in the house for a few more weeks. I stood up too. My legs felt strong. I looked him right in the eye and I said, The police have heard everything you just said. For a second, he didn't understand. Then the panic hit. He looked around, saw the small microphone wire taped under the coffee table. His face went from confusion to rage in an instant. You set me up. He lunged toward me, but the front door burst open at the same moment. Detective Alvarez and 2 uniformed officers were already in the room, shouting at him to get on the ground. Kevin froze, then turned back to me, his face a mask of pure hatred. "You're going to regret this," he spat. The officers tackled him, handcuffed him, read him his rights while he screamed that it was all my fault. As they let him out, he looked over his shoulder, and for just a fraction of a second, I saw the little boy who used to cry over skinned knees. Then the mask came back, and he was gone. The house fell quiet. Alvarez stayed with me for a while, making sure I was okay. "The recording was flawless," she said. Kevin had confessed to everything: identity theft, forgery, fraud, elder exploitation, even the Ohio scheme. Combined with Carla's evidence and Dr. Heller's testimony, the case was airtight. I sat in my chair, staring at the door he'd been dragged out of, and I didn't know whether to cry or scream. I just felt hollow. The next few weeks moved quickly. The DA charged Kevin with multiple felonies. His new fundraising campaign was shut down before he could collect more than a few $100s. His rental house on my street was emptied within days. The landlord had no idea he was harboring a fugitive from justice. The media coverage exploded again, but this time the narrative was final. A con artist's son had faked his mother's dementia, stolen a doctor's identity, and tried to strip her of everything. The public outrage was immense. Headlines called it the viral lie that almost worked. Donors who had given to the first campaign received refunds from the platform. I received thousands of messages of support from strangers who had once believed I was suffering. Some of them shared their own stories of family betrayal. It was overwhelming, but it also felt like a kind of vindication. Dr. Heller became an unexpected hero. His swift action and willingness to fly across the country to testify in person made him the face of integrity in the medical community. He was invited to speak at conferences about elder fraud prevention. He and I stayed in touch. He called once a month to check on me, not as a doctor, but as a friend. He told me that his identity had been fully cleared, and the medical board had issued a statement condemning the forgery. He also helped Carla's mother get her own case reopened, using the confession Kevin had provided. Carla's mother, who had been too ashamed to pursue it before, finally saw justice. Kevin's Ohio victim would be part of the trial, adding more weight to the charges. The trial itself was swift. Faced with the recording, the forensic evidence, and multiple witnesses, Kevin's lawyer urged him to plead guilty. He refused at first, insisting he was the victim. But when his accomplice, Stacy, flipped, she'd been arrested after phone records linked her to the fraudulent fundraisers. Everything collapsed. Stacy, in exchange for a reduced sentence, testified that Kevin had masterminded the whole scheme, that he had a list of elderly targets across 3 states, and that they'd been planning another con before I caught him. She said Kevin had bragged that his mother would be his biggest score. The jury convicted him on all counts. He was sentenced to 14 years in federal prison with restitution payments that would follow him for the rest of his life. I attended the sentencing. I wanted to see it through. Kevin, in an orange jumpsuit, looked at me while the judge read the sentence. He didn't cry or apologize. He just stared, his expression empty. When the bailiff led him away, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not relief, not even anger, but a quiet, steady sadness. I'd lost a son long before he tried to steal my home. The boy I'd raised, the one who loved dinosaurs and Saturday morning pancakes, had disappeared years ago, replaced by a man I never truly knew. But there was also a strange sense of closure. The lie was over. I was still here, still whole, still myself. A few months later, I decided to sell the house. Not because of Kevin, but because I was ready for a fresh start. I moved into a small cottage near the coast, a place with a garden and an extra room for visitors. Carla came to see me often. We became close, like family. Dr. Heller visited with his wife, and we drank tea and watched the sunset. I started volunteering at a local advocacy group that helps seniors recognize financial scams. My story became a cautionary tale, but also a source of strength. People would tell me they'd become more careful about who they trusted after hearing what happened to me. And then, just when I thought I knew every dark corner of Kevin's scheme, I got one final shock. While cleaning out the old house, I found a file tucked behind a loose board in his childhood bedroom closet. Inside were not just plans for the 2 cons I knew about, but detailed dossiers on at least 4 other elderly people: names, addresses, family details, medical histories. He'd been studying them for years, waiting for the right moment. One of the names was a woman I knew, a friend from my book club. He'd had her entire life mapped out. I turned the file over to the authorities. It led to a wider investigation, unearthing a small network of scammers who targeted the elderly through staged videos and fake medical crises. My son, it turned out, was just one piece of something much larger. The betrayal was deeper than I'd ever imagined, but so was the justice that followed. Sometimes the worst revelations are also the ones that save you, and in saving myself, I'd helped protect countless others I'd never meet. The world I knew exploded in a week, but the pieces fell back together in ways I never expected. I lost a son to his own greed, but gained a family I didn't know I had. Carla, Dr. Heller, Detective Alvarez, and the strangers who sent letters of support from towns I'd never visited. The house on Oakwood Drive sold quickly to a young couple with a new baby, and I hope they fill those rooms with the laughter it deserves. My cottage by the sea is smaller, quieter, but it's mine. It's safe. I've learned that safety isn't just locked doors and good neighbors. It's knowing that the people you trust are who they claim to be. Kevin's scheme wasn't unique. Every year, thousands of elderly Americans are targeted by family members or caregivers who exploit their trust. The FBI estimates elder fraud costs victims over $3 billion annually, but the real number is likely much higher because so many cases go unreported. Shame, fear, and family loyalty keep victims silent. I was almost one of them. If that video had gone unnoticed, if Dr. Heller hadn't made that call, I'd be in a memory care unit right now, stripped of my dignity and my home. Looking back, the signs were there. The sudden interest in my finances, the probing questions about my memory, the way Kevin slowly isolated me from friends. But how could I suspect my own child? That's the question that still haunts me. How well do any of us truly know the people we love? And what would you do if you discovered the person closest to you was a stranger wearing a familiar face? I chose to fight, and I was lucky to have allies who believed me. But I also learned that the first step is trusting your own reality when someone tries to rewrite it. If you suspect something, tell a friend, a lawyer, a doctor. The shame belongs to the abuser, not the victim. That's the message I now share with advocacy groups, and it's the message I hope you carry with you. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever been deceived by someone you trusted completely? How did you rebuild? Leave a comment below and let's talk about it. And if you believe stories like mine matter, stories that prove resilience has no age limit, please subscribe to this channel. We're creating a community of people who know that our best chapters can happen at any age. Thank you for listening. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other.